Hey guys, it's me, Terry of the Yarnjoy podcast. Welcome back to the Dash the Deer crochet along. This is part 2 in our crochet along. Okay, so last week we were assigned the head, the nose and the head and the trim around the face. And then, so I'm hoping that you've gotten that part done. I have been seeing quite a few pictures of people's progress, and everybody's deer head is looking great. I think it reminds me of, without the ears and the antlers, it reminds me of a little hedgehog. But I think it's really cute. Okay, so on to part 2. For this week's assignment is to create the ears and the antlers and then attach it to our head, and then that way it won't look like a hedgehog anymore. Okay, so I've already done mine. Well, I've almost done all of mine. So that way I could look at any parts that I think that I might be able to point out to you as far as tips goes. I created the ears following the pattern just the way it says, and I do have a picture of, see that little nose popping out right there? Let me push that over there. Distraction. Okay, so I did take a picture of the ear when I just got finished crocheting it, and it's lying flat, and so I will insert that picture here so then you can see what it looks like. Okay, so once you get the ear finished, then and leave a long tail. When you fasten off, make sure you leave a long tail because that's going to help you to sew it onto the head. Then the next step is to pinch the bottom part of the ear together, and I do have a picture of me holding the ear, pinching it into the shape it needs to be. So I will insert that picture here. Okay, sorry for the lighting on that second picture. It was a little bit dark. I'm not sure what my camera was doing. But anyway, so after you have the ears completed, then you go on to the antlers. I don't have an in-progress picture of the antlers, but I did take a couple of notes. So you make the short antlers part first, and you leave a tail. It said about 8 inches of a tail once you fasten off, but 6 inches probably would be fine. So make the 2 little short pieces first, and then go on to the long piece of the antler, because once you while you are creating the long piece of the antler, after you do the first 7 rounds, then in round 8 is where you're going to attach the short piece of the antler to the long piece of the antler. Okay, so the short piece of the antler has got 8 stitches all the way around, and so does the long piece of the antler. It has 8 stitches around as well. Let's see, I'll show you my antler here, right here. Okay. And so what you do is when you're coming, I'm sorry it's so dark, I don't know if it's showing up very well because it's a dark brown. But anyway, so once you do the first 7 rows of the antler, then you insert your hook into the first stitch. You're holding it upside down like this. You insert your hook into the first stitch of the short piece, and you do 1 single crochet around all 8 stitches, which will be, because this is 8 stitches around, okay? And then once you do that, then you insert your hook into the first stitch of your round 8 on your your long antler, and you do those 8 stitches around, okay? And so then you'll end up with this opening that's 16 stitches around, okay, that will be connecting these 2 pieces together. And then you start doing some decreasing, and while you do that, it closes this up, except it will have a hole right here where the antlers meet, and then you use that long tail of the short piece to sew up that hole, okay? And then you hide the end of it inside the antler, okay? Okay, another tip, when I stuffed my antler, I stuffed it with this dark brown yarn instead of stuffing it with the white stuffing, the polyfill, because I was afraid that the white stuffing would show through. So that was a tip that I used in stuffing the antlers. The ears you do not stuff, okay? Okay, so let's see my notes here, see if there was something else I was wanting to say. No, that's it. Okay, as far as creating the ears and the antlers. Okay, now let me show you my dash head and what I've done so far. I've gotten this ear and this antler already stitched on. I started as my guide at the outer two markers that I had on the head, and then what I did is I kind of I let that tell me what row to put the ear on, and then I kind of guided as far as the placement of the eye, from the eye to the center of the ear. Okay, kind of lined it up at an angle. The top of the eye is kind of pretty much equal to the top of the ear, okay, and then the bottom of the eye, the bottom of the ear pretty much, okay, it's kind of how I did it as a guide, okay, and then I stitched that on, and then the antler, I placed the antler on there, and I used these pins. As you can see, I've got this one pinned on there. It's these long quilting pins, and I pinned the piece on there right where the marker was, right on top of the marker. Okay, I took the marker off and then stitched on my ear, and then I placed the antler right on top of where that marker was, and the antler starts on the same row as where the front of the ear starts, and then it ends well, it looks like maybe one stitch back, but I tried to line it up pretty well with where the back of the ear ended, okay, and let's see, so then I stitched it on and hid the ends inside, okay, and so these I have not stitched on yet because I wanted to go ahead and show you how I stitched on my ear. And so I have my yarn already threaded here with the ear piece, the tail from my ear, and I have the pieces pinned on, and this was right over where I had the marker for the ear side, but then I also looked to see if I liked the way it lined up with this eye, and also I want the front of the ear to be on the same row as the front of the ear on this one. So I just followed it across to know that that is where the front of my ear needs to be, that on that row right there. Okay, so that's how I did that. And then I secured it with some pins, and I went ahead and pinched it together as I was securing it. Okay, okay, so let's go ahead and start sewing this ear in there. So I just insert my well, I inserted my yarn, and I into the head of the deer, and then brought up a stitch right close to the ear, and then I'm going to just start sewing it down. And remember, this base, you want it pinched together, so you can go all the way across, and including, you know, both pinched sides, just to anchor your ear down. Okay, and you keep looking at it and making sure that it does not shift away from that first row where you're wanting the front of the ear to be. Okay, and then I just go down into the head of the deer and then come up right next to, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be right next to where you was working on that side. It can be where, you know, wherever you want. Mainly we're just, these first few stitches, we're just anchoring down that ear, and then we can go back and fine tune it once we get it to where it's not going to shift. Okay, so I come up on the other side right next to the ear and bring my yarn through. Okay, and then and you see it's not in the ear, it's just coming out of the head. Whoops, see that? And so I'm going to go into that last round on the ear, pick up that stitch, and then go across. Well, make sure you angle down so you pick up some of the head part, and then come up. And if it's too difficult to make these tiny little stitches, you can just come out and make a big stitch. Like, see how I'm going to come out this right here. Just make sure you come out an actual hole you know, a stitch hole, so that way you can go back in that hole because, you know, you don't want to see that stitch. But you can make big stitches like that, see, and then like I said, go back into that same stitch, because that hole, because you don't want it to be seen. And then it kind of gives you a better angle to get the needle over closer to the ear again. Hoping I'm describing this right. It really helps to have one of the bent end needles. See how my end, can you see it's got a bent tip to it? Yeah, see that? It kind of helps to get those stitches picked up. Okay. And if you pull too tight and you end up with a dent, you can always get your needle and just kind of pull your piece out again, okay? So that's all I do. I've already gotten, so now that I've got a few stitches to tack down the ear, then I'm gonna go ahead and take the pins out. I'll be using that to pin on the antler. And then you just keep making stitches, picking up a stitch from the last row of the ear and then going into the head. And see, I'm going to come out way over here, but I'm going to come out a stitch hole so then I can go back into it so you won't see it, me making that big stitch. Okay, now I'm going to go back into that stitch hole. Now I'm going to look at the edge of my ear and kind of lean it forward and see where I need to put some stitches to secure that ear down. Okay, see that opening right there in front of my thumb? I want to make sure I put a stitch above that, in, you know, from that stitch down into the ear, into the head. So I'm going to try to get my needle to come out right close to that edge of that ear. Like that. Oh, I got it right. I got it real good that time. And then pull that through. And then I see I made a dent, so I need to kind of pull that forward. And then now I want to go into that head, into the ear. And now I angled my piece down into the head, my needle, and then back up into a hole, a stitch hole. So that will anchor that stitch down, see? So then that's what I keep doing, that's what I do all the way around. And as you can see, I haven't gone into this part yet. It's still it's open there, so I need to go ahead and stitch that down before I take those pins out. So I'm going to come up real close to the ear, to the center area. And then into that piece. You want to keep that kind of bowl shaped right there. It's pinched together, but then you have a kind of a bowl where the ear hole would be, and so you want to try to keep that from closing up altogether. So I'm going to go into that bottom row of stitches, come out the back there. Okay, that secured that down. I'm going to take out some more of these pins. I think it's where it's not going to shift, so I'll take them all out. Okay, and then I still have some openings there on the ear, and so I'm going to, right now it's coming out of the ear, so I'm going to go into the head right close to where it come out. But then I want to come out toward the front here again because I want to pick up that stitch. Right, like that. Okay. Pick that up and then go down into the head and then up out a stitch hole somewhere. Ooh, that's good. It anchored it down good. Okay. So you just keep doing that. See, now there's an opening there on that side, so I need to do that same thing on this side that I did there, that I did on that side, okay? And then even to secure this, where the ear hole opening would be, I can put a stitch in the middle there and down into the head. So let me go ahead and do this front piece first. Go back into that same stitch hole, and then I want to come up right underneath and underneath in front of the ear and pull that stitch through. Okay, and then I need to pick up the stitch from the front of the ear on the front row there to secure that down. So I'm going to go down into the head and then out another stitch hole somewhere, just because it's easier to make a long stitch. Oop. Make a long stitch instead of trying to make a little tiny one. Yeah, there, that secured that down. Okay. Okay, now let me show you what we can do with the ear hole. Go back in that same stitch hole, and now I want to come up in this right in the center, in the front of the ear, as close to the ear as possible. Okay, pull that little dimple out. And then now I'm going to go into the center of the ear, at the center bottom of, let me see if I can angle it right here, the center bottom of the ear, and I'm going to go straight down into the head to secure that, and out the stitch hole. Okay, see where I put the stitch, and that's going to secure that right in the middle there. Oh, that looks good. Okay, so you just kind of keep messing around to get it to messing around, but you keep, you know, tinkering with it and with stitches, and you, like I said, you kind of lean it one direction and say, oh, there's an opening and needs a stitch there, so I'll go ahead and put a stitch there. You're just kind of refining it, I guess you'd say, or whatever. Fine-tuning it. And then once you feel like it is on there securely enough, I think I'm going to put a few more stitches in there to secure it down and make sure it's pinched good like I want it. And then I will go on and we will put the antler on, okay? I'll be right back. Okay, so my ear is ready for his other antler. Now, I looked at the picture of the pattern, and looked to me like the antler was with the big antler at the back and the short antler toward the front, and kind of like perpendicular, is that it? I don't know the math term, but like straight back and forth. And to me, I felt like you couldn't see, when you're looking at it, see, you couldn't see the fork of the antler. And so what I did is I aimed to angle it just a little bit toward the ear, the front piece toward the ear, so then you can see that fork. You know, you don't want it completely sideways, but I just angled it just a little bit toward the ear, so that way you can see this fork of the antler, okay? But you can put it on there however you like. Okay, so this marker, my remaining marker here, is showing where the ear, the horn, the antler is going to be. For me, it's the hole where the antler, where the marker goes in on the left there for me. And so I know that I want to put the antler right on top of where that marker is, that stitch. I kind of center it. Now, since I've got the other antler on there, and like I said, I kind of lined it up to the front of where my ear was falling. It looks like, yeah, it's pretty much in that row. And so then I know across, I want the front of my antler to be also on that same row as where the other antler was. And I just spaced it across. I wanted to be able to, I kind of did like a finger width as far as a spacing between my ear and my antler. That's kind of how I did the spacing on that. Okay, so I'm going to take my marker out. I'm gonna pull that up just a little bit so that way when I take that marker out I can still see where that marker was. Okay, and then I'm going to put my antler on there, and I'm going to get some of my long pins and start sticking those in to pin it down, making sure that it's lining up with this other one where the front of it is on that same row. Oh, sorry. Okay, like that. It's a little bit fiddly to do this. Look at the back. I turned it around to look at the back to get it where it's going to be lining up on that same row. But if you put enough pins in there to kind of hold it there from shifting, it's not too bad. Okay, so I got it about where I want it, but as you can see, the spacing between the ears is not quite right, not like I had this one, so I'm going to shift it over just a smidgen. And I'm also need to tilt the short part, the front part of the antler toward the ear just a little bit. That's why I like these pins so much, because if you need to shift it, it's real easy just to take them out and stick them back in again. Do the finger test. That's about right. Okay, and then I'll look at it and see how I like the angle of it. I think that looks pretty good. What do y'all think? Okay. Okay, so I've already got my needle threaded onto the tail end of my antler, and now I'm going to do the same thing as I did the ear, except of course the ear had that pinched part. This one I want to aim at not pinching the base of the antler. I want to try to get it as to stay as circular as possible. Okay, you don't want it to be pinched tight. You want it to be like a circle sitting on top of the head. If that makes any sense, I don't know. But anyway, so I start going into the head, and this is a very small diameter, and so it's kind of hard, fiddly to do that. And so like I said, you can always take these longer stitches. Just make sure that you come out a stitch hole, so that way you can go right back into that hole. And don't pull it too tight. Okay. Okay, and so now I need to go back into that hole because I don't want to stitch that far over. So I go back into that hole and then come up next to where the antler is going to be, the bottom of the antler. And now I came up through the head, but I didn't pick up an antler piece. So I want to go into the row, the bottom row of the antler, and then back into the head. And like I said, I can come out a stitch hole somewhere farther over, so that way it's not such a tiny stitch that I have to make. That looks good. Okay, and then I'm going to go back into that stitch hole, so that way you won't see where I came out. Do the same thing. I'm going to come up real close to where the antler, the base of the antler. Go into the antler to pick up a stitch. If you pull out stuffing, just kind of try to clean that up. Okay. Pick up some antler and then go down into the head and then out somewhere where there's a stitch hole. Oh, sorry if I'm going in and out of the camera. Okay. And then just be kind of slow when you're pulling the yarn through, because you want you don't want to be pinched, but you want to make sure it got securely to the end of the yarn, I guess. I don't know how to describe what that is. Anyway, I think I've got that end pretty much secured enough, so I took that pin out. And so then I do the same thing as what I did on the ear, where I lean it and I see, oh yeah, there's lots of stitches. It's not secured down on that side, and so I know I need to go over there and secure a stitch down. So I'll go back into the stitch hole where I came out of, right there. So that way you won't see it. And I come up right next, as close as possible, next to the antler base. Okay, turn it around here, and then I'm going to pick up some stitches of the antler and see that's going to secure that side down. And go down into the head, up a stitch hole, so then I can go back into that hole. Okay, I can take that pin out now. And see, I secured that down really well. And so now I turn around the front and I do that same thing. I lean it over and I can see that there's a gap there. So I know I need to secure down these stitches toward the front of the antler. Okay, so that's all I do. And take your time with it. Sometimes sewing all these little pieces, it can be kind of stressful, or to me it is. So I'll do like a piece, and then I'll go take a break, and then okay, I'm ready to get the other one on there, and then I'll do that one. And like I said, don't rush, and don't put a whole bunch of stitches in there. You just want enough stitches that it feels secure. And think of, if this is going to be for a child, think of the child carrying it around by its ear or the antler or something. So you want to make sure it's really good and secure. So you do want to put enough stitches. So yeah, it's just kind of how it feels. Okay, so let me finish up this antler, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so there is my antlers and my ears attached to my dash head, so that way maybe he won't look too much like a hedgehog now. One thing I do want to say is, read closely in the pattern, but when you're making the antlers, that there is a link in the pattern where you can click on it to a little video that Jess Huff did, making these, showing how she made the antlers and how she attaches the small piece to the longer piece. So feel free to click on that if you actually need a visual as far as getting those two pieces together. Okay, so good luck making your ears and your antlers, and we will meet you up next week with part 3 of Dash the Deer. So like I said, I'm real excited about seeing everybody's progress, and I'm really enjoying this crochet along, and I hope that all of you are as well. Okay guys, have a great week, and we will see you next Monday for part 3. Bye.